They say the sky has no memory, but I remember everything. The hum of engines, the scent of his cologne, the moment I chose to warn a stranger who wasn't meant to live. That night, I learned how close love can stand beside death, both whispering my name. The airport lights looked like fallen stars scattered across the runway. I'd worked dozens of late-night flights before, but that night the air pressed heavier against my chest, as if it already knew the storm waiting above the clouds. I was only supposed to serve drinks and smiles. Nothing more, nothing personal. That was the rule I'd built my life around since I'd run from everything else. The manifest said, private charter, Milan, 6 passengers. One of them, Luca D'Amaro. The name sounded familiar, though I couldn't place why until I saw the way security bowed slightly when he passed, the way they didn't make eye contact. Power has its own gravity. You feel it before you understand it. He stepped onto the jet with a quiet confidence, dressed in black, his jaw sharp as a secret. I caught only a glance, but it lingered. His eyes were the color of night after rain, dark but reflective. "Good evening, sir," I said, voice steady. He nodded, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his gaze. "Evening," he replied. Smooth, low, dangerous. As the doors sealed and the engine stirred, I moved through the cabin, checking belts, trays, smiles. The guards around him looked tense, not the usual alert kind, but paranoid. One of them, broad-shouldered with a scar tracing his neck, kept his hand near his jacket pocket too often. Old instincts told me something was wrong. At 30,000 feet, silence can scream louder than thunder. The guard spoke in murmurs I wasn't meant to hear. I pretended to adjust the champagne glasses, but every word slid toward me through the air vents. "He doesn't land alive. The boss back home wants it clean." My hand froze on the tray. The ice cubes clinked against the glass like tiny alarm bells. I forced a smile when Luca looked up. "Everything all right, miss?" "Yes, sir," I said. But my pulse was a drumline. He tilted his head slightly, studying me as if he could hear the truth beneath my words. I turned away quickly, heart hammering against my ribs. What was I supposed to do? Warn a Mafia heir he was about to be betrayed mid-air? The wrong word could kill me first, but something in his eyes. There was weariness there, a kind of loneliness power couldn't protect. I'd seen that look before, in mirrors, after too many nights pretending I was fine. Half an hour later, turbulence hit. The jet shuddered. Glasses rattled. The perfect excuse to step closer. "Seatbelt, sir," I said softly. I leaned near to fasten it. The scent of cedar and smoke filled my lungs. He didn't move, just watched me with quiet curiosity. When I reached for the buckle, our fingers brushed, brief, accidental, but the spark that shot through me was impossible to ignore. My breath caught. His gaze flicked to my lips, then back to my eyes. A moment. Nothing more. Yet the world tilted again. The turbulence settled, but the storm inside me didn't. I bent closer, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "Sir, be careful of your guards." The words left my mouth like a secret escaping prison. He blinked once, the kind of blink that hides calculation. "What did you say?" I swallowed. "Just fasten your belt properly." I forced a small smile and stepped back, but it was too late. He'd heard the truth in my tone. I saw it in the slight tightening of his jaw, the way his eyes sharpened on the men around him. 10 minutes later, chaos erupted, a muffled pop, then another. One guard collapsed forward, blood spreading across his shirt. Another drew a weapon, shouting in Italian. The cabin filled with shouts, the metallic smell of fear, the echo of gunfire swallowed by the jet's roar. I ducked behind a seat, hands trembling, heart racing. A bullet tore through a headrest inches from my face. Luca moved like someone born into danger, calm, precise. He grabbed the traitor's wrist, slammed it against the wall, gun clattering to the floor. For a second, our eyes met through the smoke. I couldn't tell if I was terrified or mesmerized. He gestured sharply. "Stay down." But I didn't. Training kicked in. I grabbed the service cart, rolled it toward the remaining attacker, and knocked him off balance long enough for Luca's right-hand man to finish it. Silence returned too suddenly. Only the engines kept breathing. When the emergency lights flickered on, I saw what the sky had done to us. Blood on white seats, smoke curling against the windows, fear trapped in the recycled air. Luca stood over the fallen guards, chest rising steadily. He turned to me, voice steady but raw. "Who told you?" "No one," I said. "I overheard them." He stepped closer, close enough that the warmth of him cut through the chill in the cabin. "You saved my life." I shook my head. "I did what anyone would do. Anyone." His mouth curved in something between a smile and disbelief. "No, Miss Valente. Not anyone." He reached out, fingers brushing a strand of hair from my face. The touch was light, but it burned like recognition. "You're trembling," he murmured. "Because I'm human," I whispered. His eyes softened for just a heartbeat before he turned toward the cockpit, commanding the pilot to divert. "Nearest runway, now." We landed hard on an abandoned strip somewhere near the Aegean coast. Police would have meant questions neither of us could answer, so he made calls. Low, quiet, dangerous calls. And soon, a black SUV waited beyond the lights. Before stepping out, he looked back at me. "You could run," he said. "Forget this ever happened." I met his gaze. "You don't believe that either." A hint of admiration flickered in his eyes. He extended a hand. "Come, it's not safe for you now." The night air outside smelled of salt and gunpowder. When I hesitated, he touched my wrist, gentle, grounding. "I won't hurt you, Mira." "You already have," I murmured, unsure whether I meant fear, fate, or something far more dangerous. The ride from the airstrip was silent except for the hum of tires. Moonlight carved his profile into steel and shadow. Every few seconds, his eyes flicked to me in the reflection of the window, studying, questioning, maybe remembering the touch that started all this. I tried to steady my breathing. My uniform was torn at the sleeve, streaked with someone else's blood. His jacket came off, wordless, and he handed it to me. "Keep it," he said. I hesitated. "Why?" "So you don't forget who you saved." I met his gaze, my voice barely audible. "You think I could forget?" For the first time, he smiled. Not the kind of smile that reassures, but the kind that warns you you're already too deep. By the time we reached the coastal villa, dawn was threatening the horizon. The guards who survived were silent, avoiding his eyes. I followed him inside, past marble floors and ocean-scented air, every step echoing with a truth I didn't want to name. He stopped near a window overlooking the sea. "You could have stayed out of it." I couldn't. Why? I searched for the right words. Because I've seen enough people die when someone stayed silent. He studied me for a long time, then nodded slowly. "Then maybe we're both cursed by conscience." I laughed softly. "Or by timing." He turned, stepping closer until there was only the width of a breath between us. "You're brave," he said quietly. "Or foolish." "Maybe both," I whispered. The air between us changed, dense, electric, alive. His hand rose, tracing the edge of my jaw without touching. My skin remembered the warmth anyway. For a heartbeat, the world outside disappeared. No blood, no betrayal, just the quiet gravity pulling two broken orbits closer. But then he dropped his hand, the mask sliding back over his face. "Rest. We'll talk when it's safe." He turned away, leaving me with his jacket, his scent, and the echo of everything unsaid. That night, as I lay on the unfamiliar bed, the waves crashed against the rocks like applause for our survival. My body ached, my heart refused to slow. I didn't know whether to fear him or trust him. Maybe both. One thought kept circling like a plane waiting to land. I'd saved a man everyone feared. And somehow, in the darkness between gunfire and touch, I'd started to lose my own fear. The sky outside was bruised with dawn, and I whispered to no one. "Sir, be careful of your guards." Because the next danger might not come from them. It might come from me. I woke to the sound of waves hammering the rocks below the villa. For a second I didn't know where I was. The air smelled of salt and gun oil. Then memory rushed back. The jet, the gunfire, his eyes. I slipped Luca's jacket tighter around me and walked to the balcony. The sea was still half asleep, the horizon bruised with dawn. Behind me, the floor creaked. "You didn't rest," he said. I turned. He looked different in daylight, less myth, more man. The cut on his temple had dried into a thin line. His shirt sleeves were rolled up, revealing forearms that spoke more of discipline than vanity. "I don't rest easily," I answered. He came to stand beside me. "You saved my life. You deserve to sleep for a week. I didn't do it for a reward." His mouth curved. "Good. I'm not good at saying thank you," I noticed. He laughed once, quiet, almost surprised by his own amusement. For a heartbeat, the world felt lighter, like we were just two people who'd met on an ordinary flight. But then the phone in his pocket vibrated, and the air changed. He spoke in Italian, low, clipped words. When he hung up, his expression had hardened again. "They're coming," he said. "The ones who planned it. Here. Soon. We need to move before nightfall." I should have been afraid. Instead, I felt a strange calm, like I'd already chosen my side. "I'll help," I said. He studied me. "You don't owe me that." "No," I whispered. "But I owe myself something. Proof that I'm not the kind of person who runs anymore." For the first time, he didn't argue. The next hours blurred into motion. We loaded supplies, burned documents, and mapped escape routes. The villa's marble elegance turned into a fortress of shadows. At sunset, Luca returned from the cellar carrying a pistol. He laid it on the table between us. "I hope you never have to use it," he said. "Hope," I replied, "doesn't always listen." Our hands brushed as he pushed it toward me. The contact was brief, but the warmth stayed long after. I wanted to ask why he trusted me so easily, or maybe I wanted to believe he did. Outside, thunder rolled in from the sea. When the storm broke, it was sudden and violent. Lightning split the sky, illuminating his face for a second, sharp, determined, tired. We took shelter near the fire, the sound of rain blurring the edges of the world. "Why did you join aviation?" he asked suddenly. "To disappear," I said. "It worked." "Until now," he nodded slowly. "Disappearing sounds easier than it is. Is that what you've tried?" I was born into a name. Hard to vanish from a legacy carved in bullets. For a moment, we just listened to the rain. Then he reached across the small space between us and touched my hand. Not a claim, just a question. I didn't pull away. The storm outside grew louder, but the silence between us felt louder still. Later, when the fire burned low, he fell asleep in the chair, exhaustion finally winning. I watched him, the faint light tracing his features. In sleep, he looked almost peaceful, younger, like the boy he must have been before the world asked him to be a weapon. I whispered to the dark, "Be careful, Luca D'Amaro." It wasn't a warning anymore. It was a prayer. We left before dawn, taking a narrow coastal road toward the mountains. The SUV's headlights carved thin lines through the fog. Every turn felt like a question with no right answer. Hours passed before we stopped at an abandoned monastery overlooking the cliffs. He said it was safe. His father's men used it decades ago. The place smelled of dust and rain, but there was power in its silence. Inside, he checked his gun while I found candles. When the first flame caught, the light brushed across faded murals, angels with chipped wings. "Fitting," I murmured. He looked up. "What is?" "Broken angels." His eyes met mine. "You believe that's what we are?" "Maybe," I shrugged. "Maybe that's what's left when you try to do the right thing in the wrong world." He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer until the candlelight flickered between us. The air was colder than before, but my skin burned where his gaze rested. "You don't look away," he said quietly. "Should I? Most people do." Maybe I'm tired of pretending fear. Something shifted behind his eyes, a mixture of respect and something softer. His fingers brushed a loose strand of hair from my cheek. The touch was cautious, as if he was testing whether warmth still existed. For a heartbeat, the monastery disappeared. There was only breath, pulse, and the truth neither of us wanted to name. Then he stepped back. We should rest. Yes, I managed, though every nerve in me screamed to stay in that space between closeness and danger. Night came heavy and silent. I couldn't sleep. The storm had followed us, wind howling through cracked windows. I rose and found him standing outside under the archway, rain soaking his shirt. "You'll freeze," I said. He didn't turn. "I've been colder." I moved beside him, holding his jacket out. He let me drape it over his shoulders, then caught my wrist before I could pull away. "Mira," he said, voice low, "you could still leave." "I don't want to." He searched my face, the rain catching in his lashes. "You don't understand what I am." "I understand enough." He hesitated, then released a slow breath. "If you stay, you'll carry the weight that comes with me." "Then let's share it," I said. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he reached up, brushing his thumb along my jaw, a touch that said everything his words couldn't. When he leaned closer, I felt his breath more than the rain. He didn't kiss me. He just let the space between us burn quietly. It was enough to promise everything and nothing at once. By morning, we had a plan. His allies would meet us in Milan. The traitors would expect him dead. He would reclaim what was his, and I would decide whether to vanish again, or stand beside him. As we packed, he handed me a small pendant. Silver, simple. "My mother's," he said. "For luck. I don't believe in luck." Then call it a reminder. Of what? That sometimes the right person arrives when the wrong world falls apart. I closed my fingers around it. "That's dangerously close to hope." He smiled, brief and tired. "Hope is the most dangerous thing we have." We left the monastery as the sun cut through the fog. The sea below glimmered like molten glass. For the first time since the flight, I felt the pull of something other than fear. It wasn't safety. It was him. The road back toward the city wound through endless hills, gray with early light. Luca drove in silence, one hand on the wheel, the other tapping restlessly against his thigh. Every few miles he checked the mirrors. His world never stopped hunting him. I stared out at the sea, trying to forget the monastery's quiet warmth. The farther we went, the more the world turned back into steel and threat. "Tell me about the people who trained you to fly," he said suddenly. "You want my resume now? I want to understand why you risked everything for someone you barely knew." The question hung between us. I thought about the years I'd spent hiding in airports, learning routes and schedules, believing movement meant safety. Finally, I said, "Because once someone saved me, and I never said thank you." He looked at me then, not as the man who commanded loyalty with fear, but as someone trying to see the human story behind a stranger's eyes. "Who was it?" he asked. "My father." The words felt foreign after so long. "He worked for a man like you. When things went bad, he tried to leave. They made sure he didn't." Luca's hands tightened on the wheel. "Which family?" "The Vitellis." I waited for the name to register. It did. The muscle in his jaw moved once. "My father destroyed them," he said quietly. "I know." The silence that followed was heavy enough to bend the air. We were both children of the same storm, standing on opposite sides of its wreckage. We reached Milan by nightfall. The city was a map of neon reflections and rain. His safe house sat behind iron gates, all glass and shadows. Inside, the air smelled of expensive wine and old fear. He poured 2 glasses and handed me one. "To debts paid," he said. "Or to ones we'll never finish paying," I replied. He almost smiled. "You talk like someone who's lived 2 lives." "I have," I said. "One before the Vitellis died and one after." He leaned against the counter, studying me. "And which one are you in now?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Maybe the one that started when I met you." For a moment, neither of us moved. The city lights cut through the rain, tracing his face in gold and shadow. When he spoke again, his voice had softened. "I didn't choose this life, Mira. I just learned how to survive inside it." "Maybe surviving isn't the same as living," I whispered. He set the glass down and walked toward me. The space between us dissolved slowly. like a question neither of us wanted to ask aloud. His fingers grazed mine. The touch was hesitant, searching. My breath hitched, not from fear but from recognition. "Tell me to stop," he murmured. I didn't. He touched my cheek, rough skin against fragile calm. I could feel the pulse in his wrist, steady and human. There was nothing violent in it, only the kind of warmth that frightened people like us, because it meant hope. He bent his head, close enough for his breath to brush my ear. "You shouldn't trust me." "Too late," I said. Later, thunder rolled across the city again. We stood by the window, watching lightning split the skyline. He told me about his father's empire, the endless wars over territory, the price of loyalty. His voice carried no pride, only fatigue. "When I was 17, he said, I thought I'd walk away. But when my brother was killed, I took his place. You don't leave family. You inherit its ghosts." I touched his sleeve. "And now? Now I find out which ghosts are still alive." He looked down at me, and in his eyes was something unguarded, sorrow mixed with wanting. He lifted my hand and pressed his forehead against it, a gesture that felt older than both of us. Then he stepped back, shutting the distance again, building walls because that's what kept him alive. "Get some rest," he said softly. "Tomorrow we end this." I wanted to ask what happens after, but I already knew. People like us didn't get afters. We got moments that felt like them. That night, lying awake in the dark, I traced the silver pendant he'd given me. Every thunderclap sounded like a countdown. The city outside pulsed with life, indifferent to the wars being planned inside its veins. For the first time since the flight, I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of what it would mean to live without him. The Milan skyline was a jagged line against the evening sky. Rain-slicked streets reflected neon like fractured mirrors, each step forward uncertain, each shadow a threat. Luca drove through the city in silence, the hum of the engine mingling with my own anxious heartbeat. We had one night, one chance to reclaim his empire and root out the traitors before they struck again. "You ever wonder," I said, breaking the quiet, "how people like you sleep at night?" He glanced at me, sharp eyes catching the reflection of passing streetlights. "I don't," he said, voice low, almost a whisper. "Not until the job's done. And even then..." He trailed off, but the tension in his jaw said everything. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached out, brushing my fingers along his arm. It was accidental at first, but the warmth that ran from that simple touch was electric, and I couldn't pull away. His hand twitched where mine had touched, and he finally looked at me properly, not as an ally or a stranger, but as someone who mattered more than the chaos around us. The corner of his mouth lifted in a shadow of a smile. "You're reckless," he said. "Maybe," I whispered, "but I'm careful with you." The corner of his lip twitched again, half a smile, half a warning. He let the words hang there, dangerous and intimate, before returning his attention to the city. We arrived at a warehouse on the edge of the port, the place where Luca knew the traitors would be hiding. The docks were deserted, but we both felt the presence of eyes tracking us, waiting. He handed me a sidearm and went over the plan in low, precise tones. "You follow my lead," he said. "Don't hesitate." "I never do," I replied, though my stomach flipped like a caged bird. We moved through the shadows like ghosts, silent and deliberate. My hand brushed his again as we climbed a rusted staircase. This time it wasn't accidental. The touch lingered, the kind that said, "I need you here, with me." He felt it too. I could sense the tension in the press of his shoulder against mine, the subtle shift in his gait that let me know he acknowledged the closeness without speaking. Danger hung in the air, but so did something else, something tender, almost fragile amidst the fire we were walking into. Inside, the confrontation was inevitable. The traitorous guards were waiting, but Luca moved with lethal precision. Gunfire echoed against metal walls. The sound was deafening yet strangely intimate. I stayed close, covering his flank, my own heart hammering not from fear, but from the adrenaline of being near him. At one point, a guard lunged from behind a crate. Luca tackled him and I dove forward, pulling him away from a blade. We landed hard, pressed together. My face was inches from his chest, my breath ragged. He froze for a heartbeat, then pushed the attacker away, his hands gripping my shoulders. "Are you okay?" he asked, voice rough, but not from anger, from concern. I looked up at him, and for a moment the world outside ceased to exist. His dark eyes held mine, the chaos around us fading. I couldn't stop the words. "I will be as long as you're here." He didn't answer. He didn't need to. His hand brushed mine again, lingering just long enough to set my pulse racing. His closeness was a shield, a comfort, and a warning all at once. The firefight ended almost as suddenly as it began. The traitors were neutralized, and we were left in the silence of aftermath. Only our breathing and the faint drip of rain through the broken roof. Luca looked at me, his eyes scanning me as if to memorize every line, every tremor of adrenaline and relief. "You could have been hurt," he said. "I know," I replied, "and yet here I am." "You're impossible," he muttered, though the corner of his mouth twitched again. He stepped closer, so close that our shadows merged in the pale light. "But maybe I like impossible." I felt my chest tighten. "Luca," I whispered. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushing my cheek lightly. The touch was electric, gentle and intimate, full of words neither of us dared speak. I wanted to lean into it, to let the world disappear for a moment, but the city outside, the empire he carried, reminded me that danger never sleeps. Instead, I allowed the brush of our hands to linger, the closeness to speak for us. In that small, suspended moment, I realized that amidst the violence, the betrayal, the blood, we had something fragile but real. Later, in his safe house, the rain pouring outside, Luca poured us both a glass of wine. He handed me mine without looking, but his hand brushed mine. The contact lasted longer than necessary, and I felt heat rise to my cheeks. "You're still shaking," he said, though not accusingly. "I'm not," I lied softly. He smirked. "Sure. Then tell me why your hand is still trembling." I looked down at our hands, brushing against each other on the glass. "It's been a long night." "Not long enough," he said, leaning closer. "I need to know you're safe before I allow myself to think about anything else." "Is that your way of saying you care?" I asked, voice low. "Maybe," he murmured, and suddenly the distance between us closed. His hand found mine, fingers entwining naturally. I felt the warmth, the steadiness, the quiet promise beneath the chaos. For a moment, we just stood there, letting the storm outside mirror the storm in our hearts. Then impulsively he bent his head and pressed his lips to my forehead, not a kiss of possession but of protection. Tender, grounding, and entirely devastating. I closed my eyes, letting the tension of the night melt into the warmth he offered. Even as the world remained dangerous, even as our enemies lingered in shadows, I realized something. Loyalty wasn't just to the Empire, or to survival. It could exist between two people who refused to turn away from each other. By morning, Milan was quiet. The rain had washed the streets clean, leaving only reflections in the puddles and faint traces of the battles we had survived. We knew this victory was temporary. Luca's empire, like life itself, was built on fire and fragile loyalties. But in that fleeting calm, our hands brushed again, our eyes met, and for the first time since the flight, I allowed myself to hope, not just for survival, but for something more, something worth risking everything for. The city lights of Milan stretched beneath us like a constellation of broken promises. From the rooftop, I could see the streets we had fought to survive, the alleys where danger had whispered, the docks where blood had been spilled, and the shadows that still lingered. Luca stood beside me, his silhouette dark against the glow of the city. He didn't speak at first. The silence was heavy, but not uncomfortable, just the quiet of two people who had survived fire, betrayal, and the cold weight of their own choices. "You know," I said finally, my voice soft, "we could have died in this city a dozen times." He didn't flinch, just exhaled slowly, the corner of his mouth twitching in that familiar half-smile. "We survived," he said simply. His eyes scanned the streets below, calculating and calm, but I could see it. The unspoken fear, the memory of bullets and betrayal that had followed him like a shadow. I stepped closer, letting my hand brush his. He didn't pull away. Instead, he shifted just enough to let our fingers intertwine. There was warmth in that touch, a quiet reassurance neither of us said aloud. "You saved me more times than I can count," he murmured, voice low. "And yet somehow I feel like I owe you everything." I looked up at him. "And I feel like I owe myself the chance to stay, to choose something real, instead of just running from the world." He studied me for a long moment, his eyes dark and reflective. Then, with a careful gentleness, he reached up and brushed a strand of hair from my face. The movement was tender, almost intimate, but restrained, like both of us were still learning how to exist in a space without danger, without the weight of everyone else's expectations. "You don't know what you've done to me," he said finally. His hand lingered near my cheek, fingers warm and steady. "You've made me want something I've been told is impossible." I swallowed, feeling the ache of everything we'd been through. The flight, the betrayal, the firefight, the stormy nights of whispered confessions and fleeting touches. "Then don't tell me what's impossible," I whispered. For a moment, the city below disappeared. There was only us, only the quiet promise that had grown between gunfire and shadows. Luca leaned down slowly, his forehead resting lightly against mine. Our breaths mingled, hearts sinking in a rhythm that was unspoken but undeniable. "I can't promise the world won't try to destroy us again," he murmured, voice rough with emotion. "But I can promise I'll fight for this, for you, for us." I closed my eyes, letting the warmth of him sink in. "Then I'll fight too," I said. "No more running, no more hiding." The night air was cool against our faces, carrying the faint scent of rain in the city below. Yet in that moment, the world felt small, almost safe. Our fingers tightened together, a silent vow that even in a life of chaos, there was a place for trust, for hope, and for love. The following days were a blur of strategy and action. Luca reclaimed his position in the D'Amaro Empire, rooting out the last of the traitors who had betrayed him. Each confrontation was tense, but the difference now was that we faced it together. Every plan, every movement, every whispered warning reminded me how dangerous his world could be. But it also reminded me that I had a place there, not as an outsider, but as someone who mattered, who could stand beside him without fear. One evening, after the last of the enemies had been dealt with, Luca and I found ourselves alone on the rooftop of his headquarters. The city sprawled endlessly before us, quiet for the first time in weeks. "You've changed me," he said, voice low. I thought I was untouchable, that no one could reach me, and yet, I teased softly, nudging his shoulder. "Here you are, admitting it." He chuckled, a deep, rare sound that seemed to shake the shadows around us. "And here you are, daring to care about me anyway." I reached out, pressing my hand against his chest. I could feel the steady beat of his heart beneath his shirt, the same rhythm that had raced beside mine through every danger, every fear. "I don't care about impossible things," I whispered. "I care about you." He looked down at me, dark eyes softened by moonlight. Slowly, he leaned down and kissed my forehead, a gesture of protection, trust, and quiet devotion. Then he lowered his head further, brushing his lips against mine lightly, a kiss that spoke of relief, desire, and something deeper than the chaos around us. Not a kiss of possession, but a kiss that promised safety, warmth, and a future we might just carve out together. When he pulled back, our foreheads still touching, he murmured, I think we've earned this." I smiled, letting the weight of months, the terror, the thrill, and the unspoken tension between us finally ease. "Yes," I whispered, "we have." Weeks later, I found myself at an airport again, this time not as a fugitive from danger, but as someone who had found a place in a world I thought had none for me. Luca walked beside me, hand brushing mine casually, no words needed. As we watched a plane take off into the morning light, he tilted his head toward me, a smile playing on his lips. "You know," he said, "you could have disappeared again, but you stayed." I stayed, I said, squeezing his hand. Because I wanted to see what comes after the fire. He laughed softly. Then let's make sure what comes after isn't just survival. And for the first time since the jet flight that had changed everything, I believed it. The sky above was wide, endless, and full of possibility. For once, the world didn't feel like a trap. It felt like ours. Hand in hand, Luca and I stepped forward, not just surviving, but living, and maybe finally free.